What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? With the Dbacks kicking off against the Colorado Rockies, who's better to talk to than Locked On Rockies host Paul Holden about the upcoming MLB season?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans and Diamondbacks fans, this is a special Locked On crossover episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, and we are on the Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channels, where you can support the shows, fire off your hot takes in the comment sections, and support the shows by liking the videos, subscribing, and doing all that good stuff. All of it is a huge help for us here as we get ready for baseball, and it is officially back. Joining me today is the one and only Millard Thomas. I'm Paul Holden, host of Locked On Rockies. Millard, first off, for the Rockies fans that don't know, introduce yourself, and then how you feeling on an exciting day of baseball?
Yeah, Millard Thomas, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast here, of course, streaming wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Check us out wherever. Baseball right around the corner. We got Dbacks versus Rockies on Saturday. Excited to finally have some baseball back. Obviously, Dbacks, exciting season somewhat last year, led the league in runs scored, but doesn't matter when you get to game 162 and you still miss out on the postseason. I don't know. So very excited for hopefully a D-backs bounce back in 2025.
Well, but let's start there. It's been at least a ride, I think. It was an interesting season. I feel like we had kind of a very similar conversation 2 years in a row. We usually like to check in around the trade deadline and kind of middle of the season and check in. And when I've talked to you, seemed like, hey, the Diamondbacks got a lot going on, but they're kind of on a skid right now. And that if they can break this, they'll get there. They were able to do it a couple of years ago and make it to the World Series, and then they got to at least 162. The Diamondbacks in it for 162 games last year. Frustrating to not make it, but where do Diamondback fans stand right now? Rockies fans a little frustrated as they're going through this rebuild and stuff still. It's kind of been a roller coaster, but I think at least a fun ride in Arizona right now.
Yeah, I don't know if D-backs fans ever been higher than where they are right now, because you look at what the D-backs have done the last 2 years. It's not just making it to the World Series in 2023. It's the fact that you see all these teams across Major League Baseball. I guess you could throw your team on the list, but it's not even just like the Rockies. It's like every non-Dodgers, Yankees, or Mets team basically feels like they're just sitting on their hands come the offseason, right? Come free agency. It's like we have so much discussion about, why do the Dodgers keep signing every player? It's probably because there's not enough teams active in the free agency pool. And that's why D-backs fans are so happy, because you see teams like the Dodgers and Mets spending, but so are our Arizona Diamondbacks team, who's a mid-market franchise, who's going out there. You look at like teams' revenue versus how much they take that revenue and put back in their payroll. D-backs are top three, right there with the Mets, right there with the Dodgers. 2/3 of their revenue goes back in their payroll. And that's like why D-backs fans are so happy right now. It's this commitment to winning that we're seeing the D-backs do. Right now, they have this philosophy of winning over development, and you see that with the moves that they've made over the last couple of years, cutting dead weight like Madison Bumgarner when he was struggling, some of the other guys around the edges as well. So D-backs fans are feeling great right now. We're getting guys like Corbin Burnes in free agency. We got one of the most stacked rotations. We got a great lineup from top to bottom, one of the strongest bullpens since I've taken over this podcast. I think this is probably the best D-backs fans have felt since maybe coming off, probably not winning the World Series, but maybe since coming off losing the World Series. I don't know if they felt this good, or at least this is probably the best that they felt entering a season, pre-2023, I would say. Probably post-2001 World Series, sometime in that time frame.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of the opposite for the Rockies fans right now. Back-to-back 100-loss seasons for the first time in franchise history, experiencing 100 losses for the first time in franchise history 2 seasons ago, followed up by this. What do the Rockies do? They bring back the same coaching staff and make minimal moves in the offseason. Now, they are under a rebuild and have admitted this, but there's a lot of things that have to go right for the Rockies to even have them feel kind of like this rebuild is putting them in a place for success. The Baseball Reference there, I just saw something go out on Twitter the other day where it was saying the Rockies basically each position group, they were either dead last or second to last by projected WAR by those position groups here. So it's like, okay, well, how long can where's the development of these players? I expect big step forwards for Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle this year and hope Nolan Jones returns to what we saw 2 years ago. But we are still in a holding pattern with Ryan McMahon. Is Chris Bryant going to be a contributor at all this year as we navigate it? So I had to feel a little jealous because this is not the first time I brought it up with us, but at one point the Diamondbacks and the Rockies were on at the same point, the same level, losing a lot of ball games. And at one point, the difference is, like you mentioned, the Diamondbacks said it's time to win, and we're going to win by reinvesting and spending a lot and being really focused on what we have. I think some of the most impressive moves they've made that. Didn't you guys just sign 4-year deal for was
the shortstop?
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. And you know, as you mentioned, it's like the pieces of the Diamondbacks have just started building up and starting to come to this point where I think this should be a season where Diamondbacks fans go in there a little excited, maybe don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but with a little chip on your shoulder. You have to feel confident going against the Dodgers, right? The Dodgers don't scare you, Millard.
No. I mean, once we get to the postseason, I would say the regular season Dodgers scare me, but once we get to October, I mean, we've already seen that matchup a couple years ago. Obviously, the Dodgers have spent like $3 billion since 2023 when they last faced off in the playoffs. So it's a little bit different, but you get us to October in a small, you know, if it's like the NLDS where it's like 5 games of you just win 3, like, yeah, I'm going to take Burns, Gallen, and Merrill Kelly in that situation and like feel good about my chances, even though the Dodgers are going to throw out, you know, a loaded rotation, loaded lineup. And I think the point you made about development is probably like the biggest thing that's really like hit on for the D-backs for the last few years. That maybe is like that difference between like where the D-backs have gone and where the Rockies have gone. Because like I look at like a guy like Nolan Jones, and he was fantastic his rookie season. And you were telling me like, look at his numbers compared to Corbin Carroll, like they're
right
neck and neck. And I was entering fantasy drafts last year, like drafting Nolan Jones like 10th round. I was like, you guys don't even know how good he was. And then he had a down season. It's like you got Brenton Doyle, he had a great year, but it's like, where are the Rockies like success stories, or like if they have a good year like Nolan Jones, why doesn't it like last longer? Why isn't it like the development last longer for these guys? And then it's like, why don't you guys keep some of these players, right? Like Brendan Rodgers might have finally started to like figure it out a little bit, but now he's like a free agent, so you could bring him back. So it's like, where's the development success stories, I guess, for the Colorado Rockies compared to like what the D-backs have done?
You know, I'd say it is an Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle. Brenton Doyle won the Gold Glove last year. So did Ezekiel Tovar. And while the whole entire team, it's not just those two, but it's, you know, led by those two, striking out a massive problem for the Rockies. But Brenton Doyle, his rookie season, his offense was horrendous. I mean, we were going into last year just hoping it's like, if he can just be an average and even maybe a below average bat at that, his defense is so good at Coors Field that it'll make up for it. Instead, he was one of the Rockies' best hitters, if not maybe his best hitter overall last year in terms of 30. I think he was a 30-30 guy, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases, a guy, again, winning the Gold Glove. So those two guys are there, but it's, you know, Brendan Rodgers never really got I talk about it on my show all the time. It is consistency. Nolan Jones had some injuries last year, but even in the moments where he was healthy and got some time, it was up and down. Looked pretty good to finish the end of the year when things were starting to get consistent, but you never, you know, September is kind of that weird thing where it's like, all right, looking great, but it could still be a whole new look when the season rolls around again. So I think the headlines there are Brenton Doyle and Ezekiel Tovar. I think Michael Toglia is an interesting name to watch, the Rockies' first baseman, a guy that hit 25 home runs.
He was good last year.
Yeah. He came onto the scene where, you know, if the Rockies have a first baseman that can play some good defense and which I believe matters more than the average baseball fan might think, and he can hit you 25, 30 bombs and be someone that drives in a lot of runs for the Rockies, they will improve. I am not as down.
Too. Still got some power. Still got McMahon in the middle of the lineup. He's solid as well.
Exactly. And again, it's like the Rockies are already talking about playing Chris Bryant on the road in the outfield. I hate that. But it's like, if Chris Bryant can blossom in the DH role or just stay healthy enough to be a DH, and maybe he's not the big power bat that we thought, but he can hit some doubles. You know, if he can hit and be a contributor, you know, I think the Rockies will be more successful. I mean, the Rockies pitching rotation is going to be the best that it's been in a while. They're getting two of the key pieces of the playoff rotation in German Marquez and Antonio Senzatella back. German Marquez is a total game changer for the Rockies when he is pitching at his best. Hit 98 in camp, so there's like some stuff to be excited about, but this is a total prove it year across the board for the Rockies. Young guys need to step up and make big improvements, especially in strikeouts. Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle, this is going to be year 3. They can't be striking out at the rate that the Rockies did last year, so we need to see improvement from them. Ryan McMahon needs to put together a full season. All-star first half, ice cold, really cold second half, led third baseman in errors in baseball last year. There's so many things that are inconsistent about the Rockies until they start putting it together and making it back to, playing 2 good weeks of baseball in a row. That question mark about development, I think, is still going to be there, but there are some things to be encouraged by. So it'll be interesting to see. Millard, is there anything that really was outside of, I guess was Burns the biggest thing where you kind of expected the Diamondbacks to make that type of move? Was there anything else that really stuck out to you this offseason for the Diamondbacks as spring training games get underway here and you get to see this new look, but still pretty familiar Diamondbacks team?
Yeah, you said it. It had to be Corbin Burns because Walker, as sad as it was to leave, D-backs fans brace themselves to see Christian Walker leave this past free agency. But we did love, the little trade for Josh Naylor. That's going to be a very intriguing piece. Defensively, not the same, but at least offensively could give you 90% of the production. But you talk to, or if you listen to any presser by the D-backs GM, Mike Hazen, or by the D-backs owner, Ken Kendrick, they said when they built their offseason plan coming in to free agency, Corbin Burns was not on the big board at all. They did not think in their wildest dreams it was even remotely possible to get Corbin Burns. He was never even in the discussion entering free agency. It was Corbin Burns and his representatives, his agency that initiated it, called the D-backs, said, hey, we live in Arizona. We want to come to you guys. And so it's for the D-backs, that was unexpected for the fans. That was unexpected for the front office. And to add a tier 1 top 5 pitcher in the sport to a rotation that already boasted Gallen, Kelly, Fott, Monty, Erod, and not to mention the D-backs best starter from last year and Ryan Nelson in the second half of the year. So D-backs have a loaded rotation, and Corbin Burns is definitely the piece who I think the D-backs are actually playing when this podcast releases on Friday. So I think we're going to see Corbin Burns debut in a D-backs uniform Friday afternoon.
Man, and you started this off by talking about it's easy to be a Diamondback. It hasn't always been easy. And Arizona fans have been through it this year in terms of sports and stuff with what happened. This has to be really feel really good to know that this team is bought in and had, like you said, a top of the line. This is a guy if any team could add him, they would add him. And he goes to your team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. He doesn't go to the Mets. He doesn't go to these teams that are throwing money all over the place. That has got to be just feel so awesome as a fan.
Yeah, for someone of his caliber to choose the D-backs and for the D-backs as a franchise to make every move you're 100% fan of, 100% IQ rating right now. It's really cool to see, to be honest, because like you said, you go on, just Twitter's not always real life, but you go on there and it's on Arizona community, it's oh my God, I want basketball season to end. Just bring us the D-backs already. It's I just want football season to end. Just bring us the D-backs already. The D-backs are kind of holding up the sports scene right now in Arizona. The Cardinals with Kyler Murray have been disappointing. The Phoenix Suns have been a major disappointment. Outside of the D-backs, who won 89 games, led the league in offense, and still missed out on the playoffs last year, there's still the team that's kind of holding up the hopes of Arizona fans right now. And it's cool to see because this was always a franchise that was a little brother to the Dodgers. If you made to the postseason, you're going to get knocked down the divisional round. The best seasons for the D-backs were are we going to face the Rockies in the wild card game? And are we going to beat Colorado? That was kind of our World Series for such a long time. And now it's D-backs are actually talked about in a real World Series contender. This is how a franchise, people are talking about the D-backs, more franchises need to be like us. And it's insane to see because you would never thought the D-backs back in 2021, when they lost over 100 games, 3 years later, you'd say this might be the model franchise, not the Dodgers, but more teams need to be like the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I think the model, if the team that should be at the top of the list following the model is the Colorado Rockies. So many similarities between those two teams, especially, I mean, down to I think the business, down to the location where you're at. There's so much the Rockies could learn from Arizona. Let's actually, I want to ask Millard, you said people are talking about him, but are we talking about the Diamondbacks enough? And let's dive a little bit into that coming up here in segment number 2. But before we do that, got to talk to you about the folks that help make this show possible. And that includes FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I know you're giving them a little grief there about the Suns, but the Suns and the Nuggets got a lot of star power, and there's a lot of cool stuff that you can check out at FanDuel when the Suns and the Nuggets hit the court. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is the Locked On Podcast Network. Paul Holden here from Locked On Rockies, crossing over with host of Locked On Diamondbacks, Millard Thomas. Thanking you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, go check out our pal Sully, who's breaking down all things Major League Baseball on the Locked On MLB podcast. Millard, you were hyping up a really great offseason for the Diamondbacks, and the vibes are high. And on the other side, like I said, kind of the contrast with the Rockies, still trying to figure out and fan interest, I think, at probably a real dangerous spot, a part where the Rockies are going to have to show something this year to get people back in. I know some longtime season ticket holders in my personal circle have actually canceled, and it's done. They're not doing enough. So I have a simple question. Are we talking enough about the Diamondbacks? I've heard a lot about the Dodgers this offseason. I've heard a lot about the Mets. I've heard a lot about the Red Sox and some of these other teams. The Diamondbacks making big moves, re-signing key players. I still think they're flying under the radar a little bit, and I think a lot of people are not going to be considering them as contenders when the season starts.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I hate using the term, but the casual baseball fan is probably not as locked in on the D-backs. I think you still turn on like those sports shows, real baseball shows where experts are actually locked in. I still think they have a lot of respect for the D-backs. I saw like a Talking Baseball podcast segment where they were discussing D-backs versus Yankees, who has a better lineup right now. And Trevor Plouffe was dropping that knowledge. Like, you look at that D-backs team and they're pretty loaded out there. So I think from like the nerds, the experts in the community, they're really locked in on Arizona, and they know maybe the national consensus hasn't like really caught up to the D-backs yet, because if you tell someone the D-backs are going to the World Series in 2025, they either won't believe you or they will believe you and maybe not be that happy, because I still don't think they're a team that's like as popular as some other franchises, of course, that you would want to see them in a stage as the World Series. So a great season with guys like Corbin Burnes, Corbin Carroll, all the Corbins in the world. If they could go out there, Burnes has a Cy Young level season. Corbin Carroll's an MVP type season. The D-backs are on fire. That's how you start building that national audience. And then you have to go against teams like the Dodgers and Phillies. You did that in 2023. You have a repeat in 2025. Show people it's not a fluke, because that was the thing. You had a great season in 23, but then you missed the postseason in 24. So it's kind of forgotten about. People thought you were a one-year wonder. Come back storming in 2025 and show the national audience the D-backs are here to stay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people won't buy into it because of the missing it, but they lose the fact that the Diamondbacks went on like a tear, I think, to end the season and just came up a little bit short. And it was another situation again where it's like, I would love to be in the conversation. It sucks when you fall flat on game 162, but when you're at least getting to game 162 and it means some, and it didn't mean, and it wasn't like 7 teams got to lose and then these guys got to tie and then all this type of stuff. It was putting yourself in that position to be there. And so for me, when I'm looking for my expectations for the Rockies this year, it's don't lose 100 games. And show us, go into these games against the Dbacks and the NL West and fight, because I think the thing that's going to be key for really any team in the NL West, I think the three main competitive ones with the Dodgers, the Dbacks, and the Padres. I'm not giving up on the Padres quite yet because they still have been pretty successful in teams that aren't in Colorado. But Giants, I haven't done enough. I don't know. They're still, I don't know. They'll beat the Rockies. They'll handle the Rockies, but then I'll look at the Giants record and I'll be like, what? They've only won they're like a mid 70s win team. Like they haven't, and they'll play the Rockies and they'll look great. Because I mean, it's out of all the NL West teams, the Dodgers, it's unfair because they got the star power. It's the Giants who just obliterate them opening day aside. I know Dbacks fans are still remembering how great the season started last year for you guys, but it just, the Rockies need to be competitive this year. They need to go and win some close games. They're going to lose a lot of games. They're going to be at the bottom of the NL West, but this is, I think the one benefit though, like for the competitors, because these guys are athletes, the NL West is a good place to be if you're a competitor, because if you're the Rockies, at least you're looking at and you're saying, I want to be there. I want to get there. Now, the team and the things there and the investments don't always help you get there, but I think that challenge is a good thing. And I think that the Diamondbacks, I think the players are going to thrive on maybe, being a little doubted and saying, hey, we got a lot of chances to punch up at the Dodgers here and make some noise on the national level.
Yeah. Do you think the Rockies see the other four teams and it's like, man, like the D-backs, the Padres, the Giants, like, yes, the Dodgers are the cream of the crop, but that hasn't stopped the other three teams from trying the division, going out there and making moves. Do you think that inspires the Rockies to say, let's also get up off the couch and try to win? Or do you think they're like, you know what, if four other teams are good in the division, maybe we should wait a couple of years until some of those teams start to come back into our territory?
I think it's totally the intimidation thing. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing, the biggest difference maker is, of course, the Dodgers have a different thing. They have the best TV deal. They have resources that no other team in baseball has outside of the Mets, where an owner that has crazy money that will do whatever. Those two are the total outliers. But I personally, and this is just me giving a take, I think if I'm Rockies ownership and brass, I look at San Diego and I look at Arizona and I'm frustrated and I'm annoyed because those two teams have done it better. San Diego has not won the World Series, sure, but they have passionate fans who show up, and have a team on paper that has slayed the dragon of the Dodgers and been a huge pain for some of the best teams, just falling flat because baseball's really, really hard to win in the best things. And then everything that Arizona has done to bounce back, because Millard, next year for the Rockies will be 3 years since they lost 100 games for the first time, after this season. I don't think the Rockies are going to be on the same path as the Diamondbacks have been because one, the Diamondbacks didn't go back-to-back 100 loss seasons. You immediately saw the ricochet off the bottom. So I think it's the intimidation part. I think they throw their hands up and say, woe is me, and we have to just focus on draft and develop. But again, where's the development question we already had from the beginning? It's like they say these things, but they don't do it. Whereas they're a team in a market that I think could thrive, where it's just like kind of the frustrations with the Nuggets too. It's like, you got this greatness, like invest in what you have. Yeah. Basketball, a different sport with salary cap, but it's just like, say Tovar and Doyle. My big hot take right now, and I for the Rockies, if you're looking for my crazy thing, is those guys can play at an all-star level. Those guys could be all-stars. Now, it'll probably only be one of them because the Rockies will get one representative just because most likely how it is. But like, it just showed that, like, it just shows that if those guys like take that step, I'm just not confident that the Rockies will do the same thing. Vladdy Jr., it's like you should think about trading for him, right? Like you should think of like, Vladdy Jr. is kind of like a perfect fit and the perfect type of launching piece to shoot you into the stars of this next level. I mean, I know you probably can't play $400 million, but like, I just don't think the Rockies would ever do that. I don't think they would get Corbin. I don't think they haven't been able, they got Chris Bryant, but I think they got Chris Bryant because they were like, we'll pay you a lot more than other teams. So
Yeah.
I see them as intimidated by it versus we need to rise to it, because I'm sure they don't think that the Dodgers think it's fair with what the Dodgers are doing.
And you don't have to spend like the Dodgers, but you do got to open up the purse a little bit. I mean, the Padres did go crazy when they were going Bogarts, Machado, and like giving all these guys $100 million deals, trading for every star in the market. So you can't go that way and just like acquire every great player, but also do the D-backs method, hit on some players in the draft. And then once you have like a core, franchise of dudes that they could build around, then you go out there and spend on the E-Rods and get your Montes and get all these other guys. Obviously those guys haven't worked out yet, but that's when you start spending money on real talent. So I think at least in the division, the Rockies, there's like multiple paths that you can see to rebuild the thing. The question is, are the Rockies ever going to get on that path? Because I still haven't like figured out the direction that Colorado's trying to go in with letting some guys go like I don't hate Brendan Rodgers. I don't know why you have to like non-tender him, just let him go and be free agent. I didn't understand cutting your all-star catcher from last season, right before like the season ends. And I just don't know the direction that the Rockies are going in. I think that's the question like a lot of people outside of Colorado, maybe even Colorado fans themselves have.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of, because there's an answer for those things, but then there's also a timing question of like, why, and why didn't you why didn't you trade Elias Diaz after he just won the All-Star Game MVP when his value is going to be at his highest, if you were just going to get another half, million things. But let's take a quick break and then let's talk and just see what we want to focus on here as spring training is officially underway for the Rockies and the D-backs. We will be right back. We got to talk to you about Wonderful Pistachios. And if you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. And it's great because what people love to do in Colorado and Arizona, they love to hike. This is a perfect snack to take on the go. And even if you want to not deal with the mess, sometimes cracking them open, they got the no shells Wonderful Pistachios for that grab and go ease. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Millard Thomas, Paul Holden here with you on this Locked On MLB crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Getting ready to wrap things up here, but before we do, spring training officially underway. Baseball being played again. Exciting times. Millard, I'm kind of weird with spring training. Obviously, I'm excited, but spring training's like, it's kind of a tease. I'm excited to see some young guys, excited to see that, but it's just the appetizer for me. I don't get fully excited. Is there anything that you need to see this spring from the D-backs or hoping to see during this time that you're keeping your eyes peeled, or you just excited that D-backs baseball is getting started?
Yeah, for me, it's always like those camp battles with like the young guys who are trying to make the roster, like are always like the most intriguing things for me. So it's like, can Jordan Lawler come out this spring training and dominate and like fight his way to be like the backup shortstop, or like Tim Tawa, who had like 30 home runs in like the minor leagues last year? Can he go out there and win the backup catcher, or not backup infielder role? Adrian Del Castillo versus Jose Herrera for backup catcher role. Like, it's like little things like that really intrigue me. The young guys who have been great in the minor leagues the last couple of years, who could come in and be like a bench player who you could talk yourself into, as they get more playing time throughout the season, maybe they turn into like a real everyday player come by the start of next year. So I think that's what I look for mostly. Like, I don't really care about the stats from my offense. Like, when it comes to my pitchers, like, I just don't go out there and give up like 12 earned runs. Like, for the most part, I really don't care too much. I think I really just use this time to look at the young players and evaluate them. From the major league guys like Ketel Marte, whether he goes 1 for 25 or 25 for 25 this spring training, I don't think I'm going to feel any differently about him entering 2025. So I think it's mostly about those young guys and seeing how they perform, especially the guys fighting for that active roster.
Yeah, and the Rockies got a lot of those position battles to watch. Right field's going to be a really interesting one. They have a gluttony of young outfielders. Who are they going to go with? As they navigate it, Nolan Jones, we talked about him. He might not actually. He's got some competition. There might be some young names there trying to go out there and get there. The Rockies actually just moved on from one of their young outfielders, designating for assignment Aaron Schunk, which was an interesting name. A lot of people were pretty high on him, but the Rockies have a huge catcher battle this year at camp, as one of the top prospects, Drew Romo, is going to be competing with Hunter Goodman, two guys that both saw MLB time last year. Jacob Stallings going to be the catcher there, the veteran leadoff starting catcher, and then Austin Nola also going to be fighting for some time there. But yeah, I'm kind of the same way. For me, it's just I'm hoping to see how German Marquez and Antonio Senzatella look coming back from big injuries. Are they just feeling good? The best news that I've heard from the pitching staff is German Marquez is feeling energized, great after all his sessions. It's not like he's worn down or feeling like that. I love to hear the energy and tempo at camp here. And
shape matters a lot, because like Monty last year, big thing. He looks overweight coming to camp. It seemed like throughout the whole season, he was just like lumbering through his starts. So like coming into this camp, he was like, oh yeah, I lost like a dumbbell worth of weight, like 25 pounds. So stuff like that. Sometimes you just want to hear guys say, I'm in the best shape of my life. That's like the reports you want to see coming out of spring training.
You got to hear that once. You got to hear like, man, the ball's feel. I'm seeing the ball. You got to hear all the cliches here first so we can get it there. But Rockies Dbacks getting underway here today, starting things off. Millard, before we go, where can people stay up to date with all things you and all things Locked On Dbacks?
Yeah, excited for that one. D-backs start, not too fun, but I think the Rockies got like a pretty high prospect going in that one for the start. So very excited.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that for Diamondbacks fans, Chase Dollander, the name to watch. This is a guy that is trying to make his way onto the major league roster after camp, and I think if he's getting the start tomorrow, that makes it extra exciting. If you're looking, this is a Rockies prospect that they're hoping is a total game changer for them.
Yeah, wasn't he like a top 10 pick in the draft?
Yeah, top 10 pick. Yeah. He was dominant, and he got off to a hot start too when he was in the minors too. This is a guy when you're kind of looking there is like, whoa. I mean, and the stuff apparently should work with altitude. And again, we were talking cliches, the interviews and the stuff. It's baseball. I got to go up and I got to take the mound every day. It's 60 feet 6 inches. I got to go, and it's like, yeah, like that's the type of stuff I need right there. So
that's what I want to see for like the Rockies more than anything. It's probably like an ace pitcher, because I feel like I've never just like outside like Ubaldo Jimenez's like one season with the Rockies, I feel like I've never really seen them have like a great ace pitcher they could just dominate for 162. So hopefully he can turn out for that for you guys, because I'm very excited to see him in his spring training debut against the D-backs. Check us out, Locked On Diamondbacks, wherever you stream podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, Locked On Diamondbacks on there as well. And please check out me on Twitter as well.
You can find everything Rockies related at Locked On Rockies, the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, the best place to interact with the show, the best place to stay up to date with everything. I'm Paul Holden, and on behalf of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're saying so long.